My lords, I too look forward to the maiden speeches of the noble baronesses Lady Fulbrook and Lady Fleet. In my few minutes, I will briefly mention women in the criminal justice system, the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill, violence against women and girls, and the Online Safety Bill. I refer to my interests stated in the register as Anglican Bishop for Prisons and begin by asking when we will see a renewed timetable for the 2018 Female Offender Strategy. Whilst I welcome the implementation of some of the deliverables, the analysis by Prison Reform Trust shows that the government has met less than half of the commitments, and the Concordat published last year doesn't appear to have been progressed. And then that shocking announcement of 500 new prison places for women, totally at odds with the strategy's direction to reduce the number of women in prison. What evidence is it based on? And why is the designated £150 million not being spent on women's centres and implementing the Concordat? The government has pledged to give every child the best start in life. I'm a big proponent of prioritising the early years, but related to today's subject, I would say that if one of the justifications for the new prison places is to allow children to stay overnight with their mothers, this seems a strange way to implement the Farmer report findings. It would be far better if those mothers who do not need to be in prison were supported in the community with their children. Again, why are policy proposals seemingly ignoring evidence and expertise? And perhaps that's a good segue into the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill. In our scrutiny, we will need to ask if it is supported by the evidence available, and whether it reflects a clear strategy and ethos which can be justified ethically. Whilst I welcome certain proposals, such as community and diversion cautions and empowering problem-solving courts, other aspects raise very serious concerns. For example, the use of life sentences for younger offenders seems to undermine any chance of reform and redemption. The measures relating to longer sentences seem to ignore the fact that decades of lengthening sentences have done nothing to improve outcomes for offenders or prevent cycles of reoffending. Yet the myth is perpetuated that longer sentences will provide greater public protection. And rather than policies being driven by evidence, it seems they're driven by populist views and some headline cases. Furthermore, there is a woeful focus on rehabilitation and what happens during someone's sentence. Thus, victims and communities, as well as offenders, are poorly served, and longer sentences will only put more pressure on our overcrowded prisons. It's also troubling that after all that has transpired in recent years, little attention is paid to racial disparities in the criminal justice system. On domestic abuse, we did good work in this House regarding the Now Act, yet a number of issues remain, not least the vulnerability of migrant victims. The pilot project must be closely watched. I look forward to the publication of the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, and once again, I want to commend Australia's framework for primary prevention. I would also welcome greater consideration of the contribution of faith groups into future VORG strategy. I want to end by commenting on the draft Online Safety Bill. Within the very commendable commitments to safety, there is still work to do. And from my conversations with young people around physical appearance and self-worth, I would urge the government to encourage more diverse representation in advertising and to ban or at least restrict the use of altered images. I must close and will finish by encouraging the government to ensure that future legislation is based on evidence and research and underpinned by a clear ethos for the flourishing of all